I just want a good horse game. This may be hard to believe since my channel has been about Doom and shooter games since its inception, but I've also included the occasional fluffy, comfy game into my commentary. So yes, I am one of those girls. A horse girl. I learned to ride horses around 8 years old, and I love them dearly. While I haven't worked in a stable in a long time, it was a big part of my formative years up to early adulthood. Unfortunately, making good games about horses has been difficult for one reason or another. Either they're the straight up and down, one discipline riding game with shows, or a stable management sim with riding, or they're predator nests like Star Stable Online. If you would like to know more about this, I highly recommend Rattle's video about the state of horse games. So, why am I yapping about horse games? Well, a new one came out that initially looked incredibly promising, and I was excited. Because this wasn't just the same horse game we've been getting for years now, ones aimed at younger girls that are basic riding and horse care sims, but a game for the more mature horse lover and also murder mystery lovers. The premise was that you had to find your mother after she disappeared from your small, sleepy hometown, where unexplained deaths were beginning to increase. It almost reminds me a little bit of the Heartland series of books I read as a preteen. The story follows a 15-year-old girl named Amy Fleming who lives on a horse rescue farm named Heartland in Virginia, which is my home state. She loses her mother in a car accident on a stormy night when they were attempting to bring a horse back to their rescue. After the accident, Amy decides to continue her mother's work of healing traumatized horses, and the series follows her growth both as a horse healer and a young woman. I really loved that series. I appreciated that it didn't treat kids like total idiots, and tackled fairly mature topics for young readers. Anyway, the reason I bring that up is because I've been itching for a similar story, one with dark twists which involved horses and all the great stuff that comes with them, and Equinox promised all that and more. Well, the truth is a bit more complicated, but let's explore a little bit behind the history of Blue Scarab and the game's development. Blue Scarab announced its presence to the world in July 2024, boasting an HQ in Stockholm, Sweden, and a cool $7 million in initial investments by NetEase and Behold Ventures. After a lot of digging, I found out the company was actually founded in 2020, according to a sentence that appears to be getting skipped over in a press release about the game. The company is led by Colin Cragg, who... that doesn't seem to be right. By the way, in case you've never used a website builder, this is the Squarespace default paragraph. Okay, let's try this again. Colin Cragg is best known for being the CEO of Star Stable Online from 2012 to 2018. Star Stable Online can be best described as a horse MMO. Yeah, you know what? I should have seen what's coming with that information, but hang on, we'll get there. Other developers include folks who worked on World of Warcraft, Helldivers 2, and IMVU. So there's a good mix of folks who have worked on multiplayer and story-driven games. So how did this go so sideways? Well, to be honest, not much is known at all about its development. The announcement of Blue Scarab's existence only happened less than a year ago. The game was announced at the end of March this year and was looking for playtesters in the beginning of April, with presumably a 1-month period, considering the game came out on the 8th of May. There were a couple of interviews and pieces about it, but just not much is known otherwise. The Blue Scarab website does state that they are working on an MMO in Unreal 5, but you'd be forgiven for not knowing Equinox is an MMO because neither trailer about the game before its release really gives it away. I'm actually going to ignore any articles or outside information for a second, and I'll give you what you see on the Steam page. Here's the screenshots now. And now, the trailers.
Welcome to Alderwood Island. Now's the best time to join us and experience the wonder we call home. Alderwood has always been horse country. Horses are our pride and joy. It's the perfect season to saddle up, hit the trails, and take in the breathtaking sights. Now we bring you an update about the shocking death of a local teenager found in the woods last night. The community of Alderwood is still reeling and is desperate for answers. Sheriff Jane Welch has gone on the record to state that it was likely an animal attack. We have reached out to the local park ranger, Kendra Evans, for a comment on this presumed predator, but haven't been able to get a hold of her. However, some locals doubt that to be the case, worrying there might be an actual killer loose on the island, with some even going as far as citing local legends about dark forces prowling the woods.
I told you I'm done. I'm not spending another night here. Feels weird being back in the barn. Me and Mom did exactly end things on a good note, but I gotta figure out what's going on.
It's all in your head. Weird things are happening on the island.
Welcome to Alderwood. Weird is what we do here.
You're not alone in this. I'm here for you, okay?
I can't do this alone. I'm leaving and you can't stop me. Your dreams, they mean something. You're sick, Mom.
We'll get to the bottom of this, I promise.
Things are happening now, Alex. Things that will have consequences you cannot even imagine.
The description also states, settle up with friends and investigate a dark mystery, where each trail leads to wonder and intrigue. A string of events has set the idyllic island on edge. Discover the truth behind your mother's disappearance and a local sudden death, for fans of horses, murder mysteries, and cozy exploration. The sidebar also has information which does state the multiplayer aspect of it, however, there was also a single-player signifier. This indicated to me that the online portion of it would be optional. And to be clear, I don't necessarily mind games that are server-based with online elements. I play ARPGs, and it's very common to have everyone in the server enter and leave towns, but you can wander the rest of the areas on your own and not see any other players. This gives you the option to either experience the game on your own or form guilds and play with friends. I just like to, have that explicitly advertised in marketing materials like screenshots and trailers, instead of crammed into the sidebar. You'll have noticed that player labels are off in every screenshot and clip that's on the Steam page, and that can very easily mislead someone into thinking your friends, including the one you are literally greeted with in the beginning of the game, are non-playable characters. So yeah, that's what we get directly from Blue Scarab before the game's launch. There's a couple of interviews that I want to touch on before we move on to the game itself, because it may give you some insight on the attitudes around the job. The first is a fairly standard piece on the mocap that was supposedly used to animate the horses. And by the way, all these articles I'm going to talk about come from a couple of interviews with Games Radar. The mocap process is also talked about in a Steam post. But basically, the gist is that they built the mocap in a barn in Canada rather than going to a mocap studio. But because the barn gets rattled by wind, they had to build a superstructure in the barn to attach the cameras to, and this process took so long that the seasons changed to weather in the negatives. So they also had to put heaters in the barn so the mocap actors weren't freezing to death. I've got a lot of questions, but I'll stick to 3. Why Canada if you're based in Sweden? Why not do this in an actual mocap studio? And what barn would allow you to hog their indoor arena for that long a period, especially one in Canada? They actually do answer that second one, but I'd posit there's other horse games that have used mocap, and I don't think they'd run into nearly the roadblocks this process appeared to take. And I'll be honest, it doesn't even look like it was worth all that effort, but put a pin in it. The second talks about Craig's feelings about AI and art, which y'all know how I feel about that. But there's something slightly sus in this article that caught my attention. Also, keep in mind, this article was released about 2 weeks before the game was. First, he mentions that they use AI to do UV mapping for textures. For the not game devs, that's the process of putting a texture onto a model. I personally don't work with models, so I can't offer an opinion on what this process is like and how correctly an AI would do the process, so I'll let this go, I guess. I do work with textures, however, and while the manual process of texturing a Doom geometry is not quite the same thing, I do actually find that to be the most relaxing and fun part of the process, but alas, I'm going to move on because this wasn't the thing that really caught my attention. Craig asserts that, essentially, they had to use worse versions of work they were doing because people felt the better work was AI generated. I can't say that anything in the game particularly felt AI to me, but I find this answer to be interestingly defensive, almost a shield against critique of why certain things look bad. Why would you not just have transparent documentation of the iteration process rather than just using a shitty version of something you already made? There were no problems detailing the mocap process and its iterations, so why not the same with other items suspected of AI? Of course, the real reason is that they would be spending all of their time doing that, and I can agree that's not a good use of precious development time. But I just find it strange that the answer was to present worse versions of an artist's work, as that will reflect on their portfolios, as well as cheapen the game's overall aesthetic quality. The last is, well, what inspired me to make this video in the first place, and if you're my normal group of FPS fans sticking around, this is the payoff. And I'm just going to read the quotes verbatim because I just need you to hear this. What would happen if we actually approached a title for women with the same seriousness and budget that we would give to a AA kind of production for any other demographic? Traditional, you know, teenage dudes in black t-shirts and jeans. It's been a really exciting opportunity to try and work within those guidelines and say, okay, we're not making the next shooter. We're not making an extraction shooter. We're not making another survival PvP title. The entire industry is totally and completely clogged with releases with $300 million budgets that all focus on the exact same gameplay. Like, you're ignoring 52% of the world population. As a woman who got her start specifically in the shooter genre, and along with a few women in Blue Scarab who also worked on shooter games, I just gotta ask, what the fuck are you talking about? Women love shooter games as much as men do. The reason that this is a lesser accepted fact is due to a wide range of cultural and political factors that have fought to keep women out of this genre, as well as existing in any Call of Duty lobby if you are of the female persuasion. So we're quieter about it. We shrink away and avoid talking about it. What this says to me is that Craig has not meaningfully engaged in this discourse, mostly because he hasn't had to. Star Stable Online is a fluffy kid's paradise, and while there's plenty of shitty boys, they're not going to that type of game. He's not had to engage with what kind of havoc toxic adult catering environments create, although at least one of his employees has, considering she was a community manager with Helldivers 2, which, if you've been on Twitter in the last year or so, was targeted by the likes of Grums and his ilk. So I kinda just wish Craig had talked to his employees before saying something so willfully stupid. And what's to say dudes wouldn't like horse games if they were made well? If anything, statements like this just serve to enforce the stupid gender binary that exists in gaming. Games of all kinds are most successful when they appeal to diverse audiences. And I don't just mean the equity and inclusion kind of diverse. You're gonna find success when you appeal to both the straightest, whitest cis man and the darkest, gayest trans woman. And how do you do that? Well, the very start is to make a game that's good. So, is Equinox good? Well, in short, no. So, remember what has been established about this game's functionality and premise, a dark story entwined with MMORPG elements. The first thing you get to is a character creator for both your own playable character and your horse. This has already been addressed in the first couple of patches, but don't use your actual name for this. It's your online name as well that everybody can see. Actually, just call yourself Alex. You'll see why in a minute. The player character customization is decent with both male and female options, but the horse creation is extremely limited and abysmal. Not even an option to change mane or tail color, which is in the most basic of basic horse creation options in any other competently made horse games, even from 20 years ago. If you're wondering where my footage is of this, well, I can't start over to demonstrate this. There is no ability to erase your character and start over, nor change them in any way. A feature that should be a basic capability in an MMORPG. So you're just going to have to trust me on this, and there's actually a screenshot of the horse creation screen on the Steam page, so here you go. It looks like this. By the way, I would have loved to see that cinematic in the first trailer exist in the game when you start it, because it gives all the establishing context needed, and while it's semi-clunky, it would have been a welcome exposition dump in an otherwise pretty light on details game. So I named my character Arlene Sanders, and inadvertently made her look like the character model shown in the trailer. So imagine my shock when I got off a floating boat with a cutscene that basically looked like this. And I guess the girl that's supposed to be my friend calls me Alex. That's not my name.
Know that there's about 10 people on this email chain? No one's name is Alex. There's no Alexander. There's no Alexandra. I've never spoken to an Alex at YouTube. I'm Alex. Even if we were gonna overlook that, it gets better.
Jesus Christ, I'm like 20 seconds into the actual game and I'm already disappointed and confused. Why make me go through the effort of naming a character when you're just going to call me something else entirely? Well, here's what the devs had to say. So for cutscenes in the central story, we had to choose a canon name for the character, as we don't have the team size and budget to customize every cutscene, but as we are also an MMO, we allow players to choose their own name so we can build the community and not have to call every character Alex. As an early access game, we don't have all of the character voices in. It is our intention that there will be a more masculine sounding voice that players can select as their own. We don't have an ETA on this, but it's in the midst of being worked on. And I'll just read you my response to this verbatim because it basically sums up my thoughts on this. This can easily be solved by just leaving Alex out of the VO entirely. Canon names only work when they're enforced. A good example of this is in the Mass Effect series. You can choose your first name, but everybody will still call you Shepard regardless of your gender or first name because Shepard is your last name. As this is an MMORPG that's online that everybody has to choose their own names for, I'm kind of baffled as to why you felt you had to have a canon name and only one type of voice for the main character. This feels like inflexible story writing and character creation for no real reason. Either that or the story and the form of the game were not created with each other in mind. So not only did they not give consideration to the name problem that literally every MMO has solved by never referring to the player by name, but by a nickname or title, they didn't even give consideration to the male side of the character creator that they didn't have to include because they wanted this game to appeal to women anyway. And you'll begin to notice a running theme in this video. The form of the game and the story of the game do not feel like they were created with each other in mind. The answer from Ash here only makes sense if they literally never considered the unique character name problem until the last minute, or they had made the story and then forgot about it until they realized that they needed it because that's what they built their marketing off of. There's other indicators of this and you'll see it in a minute. There's another scene with a bitchy woman named Heather who basically gives a begrudging tutorial of having you ride at different speeds in a circle. Huzzah. Then you can ride to your house, which is an extremely long way from the start point, presumably to give you nice scenery to look at, but nothing else to do really until you get to the barn. Your friend from the beginning, Sarah, gives you a key, only she doesn't. There's a solid gray slide with text on it that tells you she does, but I don't know, she could have done anything behind that wall of solid gray. If this sounds insane right now, I'll have more examples of this in a second. And here's where my footage picks up, doing barn things, only not really. By the way, there is zero penalty for not caring for your horse. You can ride that thing for 24 game hours straight, and it will not be the wiser. Makes half the mechanics totally useless unless you want to XP farm, I guess. Once we accomplish our little tasks, we then get to explore the barn. But before we do, notice that toggle for walking and running that you can't rebind? The backspace? Why though? We get a bit of information about our relationship with our mom, which seems to be less than ideal, to be sure. After seeing all of this and then accidentally running out of the barn, I headed upstairs to look around the house. We get to see weird talismans, an empty chest, and the all-important cliche board of pictures in red string. It's a very, damn bitch, you live like this situation. We then go to a cinematic flashback, although it's not super clear that it's a flashback, and it's the only real exposition dump you'll get for this early access, so buckle up. Great textures and clipping, by the way. We get another cutscene with a horse that is clearly not my horse, with Heather arguing with Sarah about taking the only saddle, even though there's clearly a saddle on not my horse. Oh, now my saddle is gone, and apparently so is not my horse's tail. Oh cool! Poor texture alignment and scaling. Clearly the AI UV wrapping is doing a good job. Oh god, I'm so glad this is a multiplayer game. Okay, whatever. I want to buy a saddle. Okay, no? Oh, I'll get a free one if I do a fetch quest. Alright, sure. Lucas at the post office looks cute at least. By the way, fetching is all you're going to do in this game, so get used to it. Apparently we gotta do more deliveries as Wendy looks around for a saddle in storage, even though you're literally surrounded by saddles, but whatever. Off we go. I could have taken my horse for this, I guess, but the running animation was so funny I just needed to do it so I could get some entertainment out of this damn thing. So, other than the million graphical errors, the game is decent looking, I guess. All the characters have terribly dead expressions, but other than that, it's okay. We then unlock the ability to sprint, do a race, unlock our phone, which we aren't forced to use, and then we have to go back toward town to get treats from a different person, which doesn't really matter because we don't have to take care of our horse. Cool, a totally pointless fetch quest. This is also where I begin to notice the mocap looks weird. There's a Steam post that Equinox posted about their animation process, and it's a little disturbing how high they move the legs and how floppy they make the pasterns. They're a bit too bendy. While we're doing the pointless fetch quests, we get to see horses of different breeds for sale that we won't be able to experience, and then we get to go to the farrier. By the way, collecting items in this game from horseback is straight up ass. The hitbox on it is tiny, and you can't be hitting any other buttons while hitting the collect button. And while I know this also isn't the point, the fact that we're constantly riding around in white sneakers and no helmet is also making my eyes twitch. At least give us an option? Surely we could have had old boots and a dusty helmet for free. The Samuel character model is the best in the whole game, way better than any other model. He actually doesn't look totally dead-eyed, but unfortunately all he has is more pointless fetch quests. I wouldn't mind these so much if there was some more information to uncover, like a note on one of the shelves. Anything, but no. Just fetching, so go fetch. Once he's done, we do a race, with jumps this time. But we don't get to jump anywhere else in the game, so don't get used to it. We finally get one side quest, going out to the horse farm. Very descriptive in a horse-centered game. And what do you know? It's another damn delivery quest. And then this man just tells us to take care of his horses. His 4 identical, clearly anxious horses, all standing facing each other very calmly. And then they disappear out of the field, and we get 4 chestnut horses with no manes, tails, or markings in the stalls. Then we get to do a dumb guessing game of what horse likes what, even though there's 0 hints. You just have to guess. I think the biggest complaint about this game is that there's just not much to do. Go here, deliver a thing, do a fetch, take 10 times too long to grab a collectible if you find one, and get passed off to the next person. Your horse and you also gain experience unevenly, which I find a bit odd as there's no real indication of what XP really does to improve you or your experience. There's no points to allocate. And this may sound strange, but I actually don't get why this game is a horse game. Everyone happens to ride horses, but it's not like you're forming a bond with the horse or really acknowledging it other than as a vehicle to get you from point A to point B. The farrier, tack shop, and treat shop are really the only NPCs that acknowledge your horse exists. There's barely any mention of your mom's horse other than by your character for a brief second and the farrier. So even though horses are everywhere in this game, I just don't understand why. I understand driving a car isn't particularly practical, but the island's not big because it needs to fit a bunch of stuff in it to do. They could have shrunk the island down to about half its size and still had plenty for players to do without there being massive stretches between quest objectives. Once you hit the ranger station, the story finally starts to get going. Based on the trailer, I assume that your mom is also a ranger, although this isn't established particularly well in the game itself, but we get that confirmation from Kyle, the ranger. After our conversation with him and observing some very gnarly dead animals, we're sent on another delivery quest. I don't know why we couldn't have just finished this conversation in the cutscene, but whatever. By the way, you have to notice the all-important journal belonging to your missing mother on your own. Not a mention of it from Kyle or why it's just sitting on the table here. This is what I mean when the story and the MMO were not created with each other in mind. Why is Kyle tripping over himself to get me to set medicine out and not telling me that he has my mother's missing journal? Maybe this is part of the mystery, but it just comes across as something that wasn't even thought about when the conversation was written. There's not even the god-awful highlight shader you get over every collectible. The journal info gets added to your personal journal, which is frankly a bit confusing, but the art is very cool. Honestly, the best part of the entire game. But it doesn't come into play basically at all. I don't give a damn about this medicine. I want to decipher this damn journal. But the story won't progress until I put the meds out, so cut to another 15 minutes of excessively long journeys across the island. After you place another one, you unlock the investigation skill. Very much a Red Dead Redemption sort of deal, which is cool. Except you could just follow someone doing the same quest and get the same result. Which is a real prize indeed. A solid gray slide with white text explaining the cool thing that happened. And finally, we're on to the last quest, Yes Already, which is just a long ride to a lighthouse and another gray screen with white text. This time it makes even less sense, because the game essentially has all the information it needs to make this cutscene, and an animation of our girl holding up a pair of binoculars surely couldn't have been that hard to make. And that's it. You don't find this Alfred dude, all you get are incredibly basic, repetitive weekly goals. You don't get to do a single thing to even begin to start pulling at the threads of the story. I feel so duped. And here's the thing, I get the idea of early access. I get the idea of subscription-based MMOs. What I don't get is the shit smoothie that is Equinox. This doesn't cater to my feminine inclinations or even my horse ones. This game just isn't fun at all. Putting more story behind a paywall of seasons is already a model that's been fundamentally dropped from most games, and MMOs would have more content than this even in early access. So here's what I'll say. I don't think it'd be fair of me to compare another ARPG or MMO I play to this one, mostly because the team sizes and funding are vastly different from Blue Scarab's situation. I understand they are working with very little in comparison to other game studios who work on games like this, but I can compare it to my personal experience shipping early access games in teams even smaller than Blue Scarab's, and with a much smaller budget. And I will tell you, if any of my teams attempted to put out a game with this many things missing, broken, or poorly optimized, they would be negatively reviewed into non-existence. I understand that our games are single-player shooter games, but regardless of the form of the game, if you haven't gotten to a certain level of polish where the game feels at least like a continuous playable experience, then you need to wait to release it. The reason Equinox is not finding itself in the position of being negatively reviewed into oblivion is due to the fact that it's a horse game. I mentioned Rattle's channel earlier, and she's done a brilliant job at describing precisely the problem with this genre. We are treated to so few new entries that every time we get one, we're desperately hoping it'll do good if we just continue supporting it. But I find myself in the position where my expectations of the genre are different, because I am an active game developer and I also have a much larger range of games that I've played, so my criteria will be different. It's not just, does horse move good? It's, was this game built on a good structure? Does this game respect its players' time or money? And is content that is promised there? And I'll be honest, I don't think any of that criteria can be marked affirmatively. The weird mishmash of barely existent story elements and seeing everyone in the game at all times in a game that is meant to feel like an intimate mystery does not feel like it is based in firm footing. I would have liked to see this game being a murder mystery that takes the canon character of Alex along on a tough journey, coming to terms with her mother's abuse as she works to resolve what is happening on the island and bonding with her horse as she finds her place again in her hometown. I go through the story in basically an hour and felt zero connection to the characters, the story, or even my horse. And I wasn't rushing either, there was just that little to do. And the MMO part is just racing other players on the island. For what reason? If anything, I would have loved to race the NPCs. I could see that leading to interesting story moments where a character finds a clue, or hell, stumbles on a body. I could see that being a part of the plan, actually. If that isn't already planned, then Blue Scarab better pay me for the idea if they use it. I'm not saying this game is completely without potential, but the state the game has been released in does not fill me with confidence that it will be good for a very long time, if it even gets finished at all. This is the first time in a while I've refunded a game. I actually didn't want to, but after reports of hackers doing their thing, I'm not leaving my Steam account open to that kind of mess if I don't plan to play the game for a while. And frankly, I was so annoyed by Colin Craig's comments that I just couldn't in good conscience support the company, which is a real shame. I know how hard it is to be indie in this day and age, but pretty environments can't save the game from bad bones, and the rushed state of this release makes me question whether this was just a last-gasp cash grab from the company to keep itself afloat or keep its investors happy. This shouldn't be this big a struggle, considering all of Craig's experience, but I've noticed there's no CFO on the team listing, so maybe the budgets just never got a second look. So if you were looking for my final recommendation, do not get this game. At the very least, do not buy it until the developers have laid out and executed a clear roadmap. The one they currently have up does not cut it and is more focused on immediate issues. No clear picture of how long the early access will take is a bit of a red flag for a game that is structured this way, although I can't say much because I very much take the tact of when it's done. Although I kinda wish Equinox had also followed that when releasing the early access. Anyway, I've yelled enough about this game, so I'm gonna go back to play Let's Ride Silverbuckle Stables. It's older, simpler, and made for kids, but I have a much better time playing it. Or if that's not your speed, try Rival Stars Horse Racing, which is a modern game by Pickpock, which is a New Zealand game dev company. There are better games on the market, both old and new. So, I'll keep waiting a while for the next big thing in horse games.